Great one.
So just to kind of give you an idea of the format for this talk, it's going to be pretty free form. I didn't make any slides. And what I'd like to do is just kind of reach out and ask if anybody's got any questions first, and then figure out what rabbit holes we end up going down. Yes, sir?
I had two questions. Number one, is Red Star a real thing?
Yes. It's a Chinese-based Linux distro.
Oh, that explains the Red Star.
Okay, I have three questions. Could somebody give like a presentation on this? That would be cool.
It's really fun.
Does anybody speak or read Korean?
Yeah. And then my other question is Linux versus NetBSD. Why shouldn't I convert to NetBSD?
Okay, so
Driver.
This one's kind of a toughie, so let's just kind of step through
Yeah,
some
it's okay
different
to fight
things
with 3
here.
rounds. You got 5 minutes. Go.
Which flavor of fax are you using?
Yeah, I heard NetBSD runs on everything.
It does. So if you need something that runs on your toaster, then you're probably going to get a NetBSD port before you get a Linux port for it.
No.
Or, for example, your refrigerator, which actually might have an operating system on it. But the first thing you need to look at is the licenses. Now, since, and if anybody hears me stumble or trip or anything on this, feel free to interrupt me and correct me. The GPL is what Linux is based on. It's a GNU public license. And effectively, without getting too far deep into the legalese, if you take Linux software or any software that's licensed by the GPL and you modify it and you distribute the binaries, you've also got to distribute your changes to the source code. All the BSDs are under the Berkeley Systems Design license, or the BSD license, and that effectively says as long as you give us credit when you used our code, do whatever you want with it.
So you're saying the Berkeley license is more entrepreneur friendly?
Yes. And as a matter of fact,
Proprietary software.
the Windows the command line FTP client, Ping, and like a couple other programs that they had written were based on the BSD code. Did you?
No.
Okay.
I didn't know.
They've since replaced it with their own code, but if you've got like a 95 machine and type in FTP, it's BSD based.
And that's why, like Sony on the PlayStation, when they did the 4, they went away from Linux and went over to BSD, so they didn't have to release as much of their code anymore.
Yep.
That really did.
Why OS X is BSD?
Pretty much.
Or used to be.
Still is, sort of. And I know they still get some of the tools from that code base.
So does Linux do anything better than BSD?
Oh.
I hear that.
Wow, I did not expect to walk into this.
I hear the BSD code base is a lot cleaner and less full of bugs than the Linux code base.
Well, the package amounts that you can get from Linux is far greater. Also, I think it's quite a bit faster for certain things. And the driver base is a lot bigger too.
Yeah, hardware
So
support is
it's
significantly better than Linux.
Linux is hardware support. You plug it in. Debian's called the universal operating system for a reason. You can plug it up into a toaster and it would probably work. BSD is very good for locking things down, doing things that you want to be very predictable, very secure, but it's not going to have a lot of support for a bunch of different things.
It used to have some lower level networking stuff in Linux, like for ARP filters and stuff like that.
Right.
For networking, people used to use BSD over Linux, but I think that changed a decade ago.
Yeah, that's been, I don't know what the common knowledge is right now of it, but yeah, BSD used to be way better at networking than Linux was. Not saying Linux was bad at networking, it's just that if you wanted to build a router out of a machine, you wanted to use BSD usually because it could.
Well, for lower level stuff, it was better. For IP level stuff, Linux was much better for like software routers and stuff.
Right, and it's fast too. So.
Now, if you want to get really crazy, there's a version of Debian that has a FreeBSD kernel.
Yeah.
And Gentoo used to have a free BSD port that you can
Mhm.
move stuff over and run a BSD kernel with it.
Yeah, so if you wanted to run all those packages and everything, because, you know, the package depth of Linux was really deep, you could run a BSD kernel and get some of the features that you liked. Not all the packages would necessarily run on the system, but a good number of them would. So you have a whole Debian distribution that has a BSD kernel, but then uses the packages that are really compiled for that.
It's still a Unix, you're still gonna run like 80% of the same software.
Yeah.
So run GDK, you know, Firefox, Chromium, that kind of stuff.
But since some of the driver bases and the design of the kernel are different, some things that go into the deeper levels don't work necessarily.
If you like do graphics support, that'd be probably difficult.
Yeah.
Probably get a better graphics support on Linux.
Which is surprising.
And if you, sorry, just a second. And if you want a game, then the Steam with the Vulkan support only runs on Linux, well, and Windows. But,
For more details about that, see the Jacksonville Linux users YouTube video 2 months ago about gaming on Linux.
I wasn't here for that, unfortunately. I wish I
Check
could.
it out on the YouTube.
It's on YouTube.
Okay, sweet.
Ooh, you do.
Yes, sir.
Is there a BSD user group in Jacksonville?
There was for a hot minute, but the 19-year-old that was running it, who had actually written some kernel drivers and such, so it's not like he was a complete idiot by any stretch, moved to Texas, and it just kind of fell apart after that. That was well over 10 years ago.
So if you want to be in the a community for an operating system, whether it's BSD or Linux in Jacksonville, you need to be here
Well,
and not worry about BSD.
Well, when he left, when he left, the members that basically migrated over to the Linux user group, there was a decision made that we are also BSD friendly.
Oh, okay. I retract my snark.
We accept them.
Speaking of snark.
Right.
That's rough, man. It's like grade school. You can play
That's
with
right.
us or not.
You
But-
never
No
left grade
offense for
school,
you.
we're all still in grade school.
But I've given a talk at the NYC blog BSD user group, and yeah, I mentioned Linux and just they were pulling out the pitchforks. So it just depends on the group. Yes, sir.
I'm looking for a good dummies Linux book.
Dummies from the Linux are
Donald,
dummies.
I've not been in that market for a very long time.
That's indexed, you know, with a good index in it.
Internet's good though, good Wi-Fi, so you can go crazy on it.
Okay.
It's a nice spiral bound.
Crazy.
If you go to,
Okay, so before I start up the Googles, does anybody have, I mean, personally, you know, when, okay, so I started with Linux in '97, and it was Red Hat 5, not Fedora 5, Red Hat 5. And basically I had bought this honkin' Unix book that just came with a bunch of CDs, and I had an old, I can't remember if it was a 46 or a Pentium laying around, and I just started dropping CDs into it. What's this do? What's this do? So, what's that?
I did that one time. Didn't turn it off for me. Go ahead.
Yeah, for years.
And it had like FreeBSD 2.5 in it, it had Red Hat, it had Turbo Linux, and like 4 or 5 other CDs. Honestly, I never cracked the book. I just fired it up and, okay, this is FreeBSD. Google. And you know, that's how I did it. Now, if somebody started off, what's that?
I said Google.
Yeah, it was Google.
Ask Jeeves, come on now.
Yeah.
Alta Vista.
Alta Vista.
97.
No, Google's been around for a minute.
Oh,
Yeah, 97 is when Google started.
If you go to
I didn't adopt
YouTube,
Google till '99.
if you go to YouTube and go to Joe Collins, you'll see everything you want from start to finish on Linux.
see, there's a,
Yeah, everything.
Joe Collins?
Joe Collins.
Joe Collins.
Yeah, and he
Just like it
starts,
sounds.
there's a guy who comes to LUG who's written a couple books. I have this book on securing.
Yeah, well, I just looked it up, it looks like he's only written the securing and
Okay.
hardening Linux systems.
Oh, the guy in Georgia?
Yeah, Donald T-Vault.
He's
Thank
got
you.
some decent YouTube
I
videos.
googled his name, and
He
Okay.
has some good
I only
YouTube
saw one
videos
book.
too. It's a,
That's
something
cool.
about
Joe
Mac
Collins?
or something. He's got some
Easy
decent
Linux.
YouTube videos.
If you remember
YouTube
Mobile
videos.
Networks,
Yeah.
little servers, they used to have a series of books they put out, and I can't remember what it was based on, but they had a Linux fundamentals book, and that was probably one of the best comprehensive books I've ever come across. It started like with partitioning, went up to like the INET system, it covered like the whole gamut of stuff. It wasn't a Cobalt Networks book, which they based on something else. I have to go back and look, something like Linux fundamentals, something like that.
I know what you're talking about.
It wasn't a very big book, but it was really, I mean, it was really comprehensive. I think I still have a copy of it.
There's also a lot of stuff you find on O'Reilly, and there's actually, if you're interested in learning Linux, there's like a school called Linux Academy, which I highly recommend, because they not only do Linux, but you could do all types of other things, like you could expand on it.
If there's interest in something like that, we'll do it research. If there's interest in a a multi-hour, sit down.
Linux basics.
Right, Linux basics, but like actually, we can only do so much here in a hour-long time frame, which ends up being like, either 45 minutes or 2.5 hours, depending on the amount of booze. But
Do you have exhibits at these slides?
Yeah.
Because O'Reilly usually is pretty good if you reach out to them.
yeah, they've given us last year. They gave us a whole bunch of vouchers.
Yeah, like a 1-month subscription for the books, right?
Yeah, they gave us a whole bunch of online stuff and a couple like free vouchers.
Yeah, and then besides Orlando, they gave out, everyone got a book just for.
Actually,
Physical
yeah,
edition.
we had that.
Different thing.
We had that.
We got something too for the
Yeah, yeah, we got that
CTF
too.
winners. We had some like nicer giveaway. Oh no, that was the 3 month of lab.
Yes, the
The
network.
Sands?
Networks, that one.
Yeah, Sands.
Yeah,
We had that,
Still got it.
which I almost
Of course you did.
pocket for myself. but-
Because I got second in the CTF.
I won 2 networks
I've
that
got
one year.
pretty
I got one layer, remember? I think we were there.
Yeah.
Is there a way to run Windows
Yes,
I won
executables
both tracks.
as a Linux, as a
And I gave the other
subsystem,
way.
not having to run a VM?
So actually, there's a few ways.
Yeah.
The main one being called Wine.
Yeah.
It's Windows is not emulator. And basically what they've done with that is they've reverse engineered all the DLLs and everything else to run on Linux. It's very much an alpha. The last I checked, it might have gone into beta, but it's been around for
Forever as
years.
alpha.
Yeah.
So
They
maybe
hit
not
beta,
run
then Windows
Linux.
10 comes out and it's back out.
But it's actually making some decent headway because of going back to the gaming. Steam has been working with it.
Yep.
To basically allow Windows games to run in Linux. So,
They're pretty functional. I used to run some of the Macromedia programs that a long time ago, Flash and Dreamweaver.
They've got a whole database.
Yep.
That where you can just search like, hey, I want to run whatever the heck. Microtik, the router company, they don't make a Linux GUI for their routers. They just tell you it's one. And they actually just make sure that program is properly supported with Wine.
additionally, and I can't remember the names of them off the top of my head, but there was a few utilities where you could launch it and it would come up looking like a Windows window, and you could say, okay, install .NET, install
Wine Tricks.
bingo.
Yeah.
Wine Tricks, when you run Wine Tricks, it's a graphic user interface, and you go, I want this, I want this, I want this. And usually what you want to do is you want to install, the number one thing that I do with Wine Tricks is I install core fonts, because that fixes a bunch of problems right off the bat. All the proprietary Windows fonts that you might come across in a piece of software.
The key thing is it is not an emulator. It is,
Yep.
It's a complete reverse engineer of the Windows stack.
So you're not running, some sort of VM. You're not running Windows code. You're running someone's reinterpretation of the DLLs.
And when it goes through Steam, it's mostly figured out for you. I've run 4 or 5 games, run very smoothly on Linux all through. The back end is Wine, the front end is just, you open Steam, change some settings, hit install, run the game.
And WineHQ is pretty good. It gives you all that. They constantly update that. So
So
that's, yeah, I love Wine.
And the crazy thing is, once you install Wine,
Who's ever said that? Maybe that's the first time anyone's ever said that.
it's like the Platinum stuff, which has got, you know, Flash CSS, cool. And you would just drop the CD in your computer, as long as you have Wine installed and configured, you just double click the exe.
Yep.
It's like, you know, no opening up the command line necessarily and having to map to no, you see the exe, double click it, and it's open with Wine, and off it goes.
Since they're talking about the evil Windows, speaking of evil, my friend here went to the 2019 Linux, Southeast Linux Fest.
Okay.
He said there was Microsoft people there,
Mm-hmm.
A lot of them.
So,
and he got some, you know, he says after you talk to him for a while, you get a little friendly. He starts telling you things they ain't supposed to tell you.
so
And
here's
so
the.
what do we know about that?
Okay, so right now, their big push is Azure. And I think I read somewhere that it's like 55% of the Azure stack that's running right now is running Linux.
That's what they told us
So is there,
when they were drinking.
yeah,
Microsoft sent me this to demo,
yeah.
specifically so I could run the Windows subsystem for Linux
It's
Oh,
nice too.
very good.
on
Nice.
this the
Nice
fancy
to be
computer.
you.
So,
But,
But that's the other thing is, in Windows 10, if you're at a certain patch level, you have the Linux subsystem for Linux where, or the Windows subsystem for Linux, where basically you just go down to the start button and the way I do it is just CMD and then you can type in bash.
Mhm.
And you've got a full bash shell.
But it won't run a GUI.
so they're kind of
No
doing
X.
like Apple did when they changed from the prior OS X and turned it into BSD-based OS X.
Well, it was OS 9 and then OS 10
Right.
was the,
And
But
so
that was
the
an-
point is, it's now,
But that was
the
the
old
emulator.
software is, you know,
Good point.
but, so Windows, or Microsoft, I should say, to be more accurate about it, is trying to
what
get
they're,
rid of the old Windows, and all of a sudden it'll be.
what they're trying to do is woo developers.
Right.
And they know a good chunk of developers work on Linux.
Okay.
If you can't convince me to switch to IIS for my web server, maybe you can convince me to use Apache on my Windows server.
Yeah.
And I'll give the example of, you know, I work in a 100% Windows shop. Right, my boss, when he sees me deploying Debian VMs for whatever, makes him uncomfortable a little bit, right? Because he's not, he's got Windows technical
Right, he's a
capability,
Windows guy.
but he's a Windows guy, and if something goes wrong with the Linux box, he's gonna be like, uh-oh, right? He's been doing Windows for, you know, however many years, a lot, right?
Yeah.
And he's competent with Linux, he and I were tinkering with this thing, but at the end of the day, he's gonna open up Vi and be like, oh crap, right? And when you're in an outage scenario and there's people angry, you know, oh, I saved $10 or whatever by using Windows for letting Potts go crazy on his Linux stuff for this, or could I have been installed Windows System for Linux on my Windows server and installed Apache there and achieved the goal of the vendor saying, hey, we only support Apache for web servers, not IIS, and then now ta-da, he could have achieved everything he wanted to, you know, MariaDB, everything that you would do on a Linux LAMP stack. With WAMP, right?
Yeah.
But not having to use anything but you literally just do bash and then you do apt-get install
Whatever.
Yeah, I
Apache.
call it WIMP.
So I've also been noticing a shifting of tide inside of Microsoft.
Back then.
So for Microsoft, they
Yeah,
have
web servers all
open
day.
sourced their calculator. They well, I mean, but
Yeah,
it's,
but-
it's still moving. Somebody
Little-
in
little
there
steps
that's
at a time.
important is a Linux guy, and they're starting to move all their stuff towards that Linux
Yeah.
mentality. So then they did the Windows subsystem for Linux, and then the 2.0 just came out. When I figure it out and figure it out, well, I think I'm going to talk about it. Talk about Windows at a Linux user group.
I wanted
Hey,
to
that's all right.
I
If they're
specifically was
trying
like,
I've done it.
to infiltrate our life, we might as well know
Know what
who
the enemy's doing,
who
right?
this girl is that keeps knocking on our
So the
door.
Windows subsystem for Linux 2 is a Windows-built kernel
Right,
that's also open source.
right.
And then they just came out with their Windows Terminal. And their Windows Terminal, they built from the ground up, but it supports, a better terminal, a better interface. Did they open source Notepad yet?
I think so. They're
That one I'm not sure about.
They're really moving up in.
Yeah.
But
it
of
is
course, when you think
multi-platform.
about it, anything that's not
For a Windows terminal.
Yeah.
based on the old Windows crap,
Yeah.
But the-
So the point that I'm starting to take from it in the last 3 years, I think they've been starting to move a lot more towards that Linux mentality. They've been open sourcing stuff. They open source their terminal.
PowerShell.
Yeah. PowerShell's open source.
Yep.
PowerShell's multi-platform. And then they came up with a whole font scheme and they open sourced that. And so, yeah, nobody cares that there's one extra font out there that's open source. But it's kind of cool that they're now releasing a lot of the stuff that Microsoft is paying people. They're building stuff and then they're giving it away, which was not the Microsoft of 10 years ago.
yeah.
Well,
Well, what they were saying, what they were saying of that is,
Azure.
within 5 years, Windows 10.
Yeah, Azure Data or are they going to start
That's what
you know,
those guys
using
were
more and more
saying.
Linux
I'm
and
only saying I was
Windows
saying
10's gonna be
and
gone?
paying
That's what
less
they
and less
said,
for
it
the stuff
was
that they
saving
do.
the
Yeah.
Windows.
Well, you
Well,
mean-
it'll be
It'll cost.
Windows as a service.
Well, whatever it's gonna be, but
WAS.
they were all talking there, there's about 15 of them, all talking away there, and I was just listening. Cause I wasn't ready, man.
And I can actually tell you what the paradigm shift was. Balmer quit.
Yeah.
Satya.
So the old
Sounds right.
I sort of say Jobs. The guy with the glasses.
That does not help.
You know, the two, there was Balmer and there was the other guy, Gates, yeah, Bill Gates. I think of him so much I forget him.
Oh, he's been retired.
Basically, Bill stepped down as CEO, Balmer took over, and they were doing kind of this with Bill, and then just started doing this
Yeah,
with
then they
Balmer.
did Vista, and then they did 7, which was all right, and then they did 8. And then right after 8, I think that's when Balmer went out, right?
Yep.
Right when 8 was on the way out? Nobody liked 8.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Can we go to Linux questions?
Oh, sorry.
One more. I wanted to note this. This is a big deal. It happened a couple months ago. There's a mailing list called the Linux distros list, which is a whole bunch. It's a privileged distro list for like really significant vulnerabilities in Linux, and you know, there's not many distros that are involved. I mean, there's the big ones, right? But trying to find. I made that first. Okay. Trying to figure out how many vulnerabilities that Microsoft has found recently, and they basically were like, you know, Microsoft got invited to join this, and they're alongside. I'll just pull them up here. So, like Linux distros, representatives from Amazon Linux, Arch Linux, Chrome OS, not like Google, but just the Chrome OS team, Cloud Linux, Core OS, Debian, Gentoo, OpenWall, Oracle, Red Hat, Slackware, SUSE, Ubuntu, and WinRiver. That's it. And like some independent people, and now the Microsoft Linux Systems Group got invited to it and got fast-tracked acceptance because they do so much Linux work. They commit so much code. They do an incredible amount of stuff. But it was a kind of a big deal. Like, hold on, we're letting Microsoft into our, you know, the place when the whatever the recent CPU vulnerability was.
Heartbeat.
That one. That was found out there. They discussed that for months in that distro list before it became public. Because this is where they all figure out. Now, obviously, Microsoft was told because it affected Windows as well. But you know, as Google is figuring out, since they were kind of leading that thing, they figured out how to mitigate it. Microsoft is involved in this, and they're involved in Linux stuff. And then at the end of it all, they're like, wait a second, Microsoft should be in the main list. We shouldn't have to be CCing them outside the list. So they've been accepted, they're a part of it. Which is a huge deal.
Slow to do patches and fixes and you know, that, what is it, Update Tuesday or whatever they do?
Patch Tuesday still exists.
And so you're saying vulnerabilities across the operating systems or just specific to Linux? In other words,
Just Linux.
so
this is a distro
they're
list.
helping Linux find Linux
Yes.
vulnerabilities, not Windows vulnerabilities.
Correct. Correct. So if there is a Linux vulnerability, the group of people that all put their heads together to try and figure it out, Microsoft is at that table. There's 15 distros at the table.
Right.
One of those is Microsoft.
And my mind goes to, well, I thought Windows was the big pain in the butt with building. So they're gonna fix our stuff, but what about their junk? But if they base this thing on Linux in the future, they'll already be there.
Yep,
So
Right.
it all is making sense,
yep, and they've got their Windows.
but I'm
system
sticking with
for
Linux
and they've
and
got
hope the
their
guy
Azure,
stays.
Azure
nice to
Linux.
do.
This is another one.
Platinum member?
Right.
Oh, yeah, they're donating, right?
Platinum member. That means they're getting some dough from them, right?
The Linux Foundation, they're paying the Linux Foundation.
Yeah.
Those guys said they would put as much money as needed.
Oh, really?
That's, I told you
So
that.
just, yeah, and again, this has totally gotten off of the weird angle. But I just want to note that because it's really, it's a, me being, using Windows on, my daily work and Linux and everywhere else, right? I've been pretty blown away with Windows' support. I no longer really feel the need to use a Linux box to support my Linux VMs. I can just type an SSH from my PowerShell. Works
Oh,
great.
that's the other change that I forgot about. Supported SSH right inside of
Yeah.
PowerShell.
Yeah, it's just there. Like, no longer is there a package you install. PuTTY is dead to me, frankly.
Yeah,
You just open up PowerShell, type in SSH,
just works.
whatever at whatever, and just you're in. Like SSH keygen's all there, all happy.
Does your X11 work?
Hmm?
Does your X11 forwarding work? There is no X11 in
It's like the
WSL.
board
Right.
being assimilated.
So, I heard that a new Raspberry Pi came out, and I was wondering if anyone wanted to talk a little bit about the Raspberry Pi 4.
So I can actually do that because I read up on it.
Yeah.
It is a,
Is that what I'm saying?
Yeah, right here.
Yeah, Russell wanted to talk about it a little bit.
okay, do you
Yeah,
want
we
to
can
go?
boot it up.
Got a fan.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Playing a keyboard.
it's a good idea.
He said, is this where we get to watch the boot line?
Yeah.
I like this part of the meeting.
$35, should perfect.
There you go.
All it needs is the
Oh,
ether.
thank you, sir.
Christmas gift
And
for
some
you.
chapstick, I need that.
Yeah, I know. It's Linux lit stuff.
All right.
Plug over
Is
there.
this what I have to ask for help?
For what?
He's a young one.
Hey, I got it for free, I gave it to you.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
No, I paid for
I kept all the good
Yeah,
stuff.
I paid for the people.
That's an open short
You
shirt.
did?
Open source shirt right
I
there.
opened it.
You got enough free ones to make them.
Let's see here.
The wife felt sorry for him.
I felt sorry for you.
No, the wife felt
Felt sorry for me.
yeah, because he was up there with those people like in New
Oh.
York City or somewhere.
New York City.
It was College Park, Maryland. University.
Couldn't understand him, he was
Ask it
talking
Alexa.
like,
Yeah.
Talk
What
Alexa.
about you mean?
yeah.
Hey Alexa,
You got a problem
can you
with
order more paper towels, please?
Find any results for paper towels.
that? What? What?
I said a reminder to order paper towels.
Well, that's it. It said a lot of stuff.
Couldn't
Yeah,
get- couldn't get
That,
one,
which
actually.
version?
The Raspberry 4,
Four, that is.
yeah, it runs about, it starts at the same price as the original, $35. But it's about 4 times faster than the original. And they also have, instead of just 1 gig of memory, you can get 2 and 4 gigs. So at 4 gigs, each one is a $10 step. So $10 more, you get 2 gigs, 10 more, you get 4 gigs. It's running a gigabit Ethernet, a dual monitor. It has dual HDMI monitors,
Mini.
1080s, yeah, minis.
4K.
And it can do 4K on one, not 2, but it can do 1080 on the 2. Also has USB 3, full speed USB 3,
Wow.
and full speed gigabit. And it's hot, so I have a fan in the box.
Huh.
The heat sink come with it?
So
No.
it's got, what, it got 80, what's it got for Wi-Fi?
The Wi-Fi is the 2.4 and 5 gigahertz bands, and it's
AC, I think?
I think it is AC, yeah.
AC, I
Yeah.
think so maybe.
The,
yeah, yeah.
Okay. And Bluetooth?
yes.
Might as well get everything, you know.
So here's another interesting thing is before, with the older Raspberry Pis, is everything ran off the USB bus. And USB 2 tops out at 480 megabits a second-ish. This thing's actually got a PCIe link. So that's how you can get the USB 3, that's how you can get the full speed gigabit, because it's got a PCIe 4-lane.
So these other
Yeah, the original-
competitors are making Pi-like boards.
That was quick.
I
Yeah.
can't think what they call it. Is it, you think that's what's pushing Pi to jump they're leapfrogging each other?
I think so. There's another thing you gotta remember though, is that they changed the architecture again-ish. So there's a lot of older programs that'll run on the 3 and the 3B that won't run on this.
Wasn't the
When
three
you
be
say
like
older-
32-bit? Like
It was ARM
ARM
64.
A9 or something like that?
What was ARM 64?
Okay.
Oh, I don't have my,
Oh, the Wi-Fi.
I gotta set up.
Yeah, like one of the things that they're scrambling to catch up is the
Don't
RetroPie,
yell out the key.
like the gaming emulation
IT
stuff. They haven't quite coming up with that yet.
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah, don't yell out the key.
Don't yell out
I
the
don't need,
password.
I don't need the internet.
Okay.
What?
Well, I can give it to you.
Yeah, that's okay.
Okay.
Or type it in.
what else is there with no internet?
We got a,
I
video
did
recording
it
on
offline. Let's see
Yeah.
here, what have I got here? I forgot.
I don't know if I can handle the post-production of editing it out if we all yell out the password.
Nice job. Oh, they need prepared somehow.
Yeah.
Oh, the password's, or password one, right?
Yeah.
Something like that.
One exclamation point.
It's monkey.
All
Monkey.
passwords. That one was copy 2 minutes.
134. Bye.
I'm gonna buy a couple of these.
So what would be a couple real-world uses of a Raspberry Pi?
Well, now it's desktop capable, so as far as I'm concerned, it's fine for doing desktop work. You know, it's got LibreOffice and
Coming
all
soon
those.
to a corporation near
Yeah,
you.
yeah, so
Standard
they can
desktop.
throw away your $1,000 laptop and give you a $35 computer. And say,
Yeah,
have fun.
but your $35 computer doesn't come with a monitor or mouse or anything.
Okay, how many people have a monitor? Yeah.
So that-
You can get an HDMI monitor
Oh.
this big for $150.
You can hook it up to one of these.
You get a whole thing for about $120.
Yeah, it's quad core, so
Key is-
64-bit. Now, the operating system's not 64 yet, but it's coming soon.
Oh, cool. I'm halfway through the install. Last week, I got started.
So you get a 4 gigabyte.
Some Ruby thing, I think.
120 bucks. I've got the Blaze.
There's no sound, so.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go back and play with it.
This is just a video, just to show you the
You should have
video.
a
That's good quality.
thing for just Pi.
See how it does.
So the one thing I've seen, you're talking about what's the uses of this, it's great if you want to tinker with Linux on a not your computer.
Yeah.
Like if you are just commonly using Windows and happy, like this is it's great. Now you're not going to be able to install multiple distros, you're not going to do some crazy stuff, because really,
It's only Raspberry, well, there's a couple of different flavors now,
And there's
but
actually,
basically Raspberry.
there's a BSD in there.
I don't know if it'll run on this one, but there is a free BSD.
Right.
There's a Kali build for Raspberry Pi. There's a Parrot build for Raspberry Pi. There's a Debian build for Raspberry Pi.
On Windows 10.
Yes, there is.
Windows 10.
There is Windows 10 IoT.
There is no GUI. So don't expect there's a.
No,
there's a-
there's somebody reverse engineered that
That's the
too.
first thing that came out.
And I've run
That's pretty hard.
well, the
CentOS?
very alpha version of Windows 10 GUI
Okay.
on here. On the 3, it's
Yeah.
but on here, it actually works.
So I
I wouldn't
have
use it as a Windows 10
Right,
computer,
right.
but it worked.
so here's what I wanted to do, and now that with this might work, I have, again, ridiculous, I have an Active Directory domain for my house, and I have a domain controller, 2 of them. But one is, I just.
Well, you have to have them in a pair. You can't just have one domain
So I have one in the
controller.
data center, and I have one on a laptop sitting in the house. Just, it's a laptop, keyboard broke.
Every week runs his kids, be like, you're grounded, locked out.
Disable your
Disable
account.
Living room.
It's true. But I was hoping to get a Raspberry Pi and run a headless, Windows Server Core domain controller on that. I think I can do it on this now. That was a couple months ago I was looking into this. But this is, anyways, it's great if you want to tinker with Linux on a not thing, right?
On a budget.
On a budget. It's great if you want to have a computer and fulfill your TV that you watch Netflix on, because of the HDMI and the 4K support.
Yeah, Kodi, or what is it now? It's not quite Kodi anymore.
No, it's not. It's an old XBMC based code too.
But it's a great.
Yeah.
On top of the fact, you've got projects like Pi-hole, which is a network ad blocker.
Right.
It's based on DNS, so you just plug it into your network and no more ads.
configure your router briefly.
Yeah,
But
configure.
That might be worthwhile.
So it's really
You've got RetroPie, which is, I think it goes all the way up to PlayStation 2.
Right.
If you've got the ROMs for specific games, then it'll emulate damn near anything.
Okay.
You know, you can hook up that to your TV and play Super Mario Brothers.
Pi is strong because it's a consistent hardware base, and we can make fun of Apple for a second, but the reason Apple apps are common is because everyone has the same hardware platform, right? And so the Raspberry Pi is just an incredible number of different neat things you can do with it, because if I set it up and I publish it, you can do it, replicate it exactly. I mean, there's micro SD cards that you can just order, or an image you can write. That is a 100% working.
Pop into a Raspberry Pi.
Because here's the thing, you have different versions of the architecture that's being released, and then people that have different Pis are having problems with the architecture.
Sure.
The real weakness of the Raspberry Pi is that it's running ARM.
Yeah.
And the thing is, there was a competitor to the Raspberry Pi, a little bit more pricey, but it ran x86 64. It was
Yeah, I
running.
got one.
It was running.
There's
Is
an
the Nook,
Atomic Pi.
is the Nook really a competitor for that?
The Joule. It was called Joule.
Okay.
There's also one called the Atomic Pi.
Yeah.
There's also,
And it'll run, it's an x86 processor from Intel.
there's also the Panda.
Yeah.
And the espresso latte.
There's two other ones.
There's a bunch of them.
That way you can,
When did it
you can
come
run
out?
full window.
3 months ago, 4 months ago.
Catch up.
It's on Amazon. They used to sell it.
Another good use for Raspberry Pis is like a DLNA server. So you, just like, you know, you have Chromecast and like Fire Sticks, you can do the same thing with a Raspberry Pi and just plug it into the
Joe, your
back.
coffee.
Yeah, and actually, I had a Raspberry Pi 3 that I had set up as a Plex server in a box about this big with a couple of SSDs and a couple of Wi-Fi cards. And it was in my car, and basically I was using it to tether my phone out to my wife's Kindle and my kid's Kindle and have the Plex server.
I remember that.
I know. It's like I'm on a road trip. All the movies.
Can a Raspberry Pi be used to run industrial controls?
I'm sure they are, yeah. So I'm halfway through 101 million projects.
We do a Siemens one and a lot of electrical.
You could put one inside of like a Pelican case with some hard drives in there, and then like a Wi-Fi and just like share out data.
Oh, you could probably use there's a couple stronger ones, a little more powerful ones, like an 8-core CPU. I think it's
Like an XU4.
an Odroid.
Like
yeah.
an Android,
You
yeah.
can use an Odroid too for that.
Dan's not paying attention.
No, he's not.
He said the name. He's paying attention. Dan built an Odroid inside
File
Pelican case
server
with hard
you
drives,
can
like
access
14
terabytes
terabytes
of data.
of storage inside
Now,
the thing.
Very cool.
Here's a real niche one that I might or might not be working on depending on how things come out.
Oh,
So I have an old Commodore 64 that I bought 20-some years ago.
Nice.
And I never bought cables for it. So finally I got a wild hair and I'm like, you know, maybe I can show my kid this or whatever. So I went ahead and bought the cables and I'm gonna plug it up and test it out this weekend. If it works, wonderful, I'm not gonna mess with it. Well, I'll mess with it, but not the innards.
that's a lie too.
If it does not work, there's a company that sells a $30 adapter card that plugs it, that screws into the side of the Commodore 64, makes the keyboard USB.
Nice.
And you think about the size of a Commodore 64 bread box, you could fit a couple of hard drives, battery, and a Raspberry Pi in there, and that could be my portable server.
So if he presents from a keyboard up here, that's what he's doing.
Yeah, so if I come in and lay down a Commodore 64, you'll know what's up.
HDMI out to Commodore 64? That's not normal.
What I wanted to do at 2600, I wanted to buy like an old 90s case and like a CRT and drag it into 2600 and just have like a Raspberry Pi inside and install Doom on it.
Just the whole
Sleeper build.
Just bring the whole thing. A 1990s computer simulator.
so I was working on something about a year ago that I've never really finished yet, but the goal was to take a bunch of Raspberry Pi and Pi Nanos and use them as sensors. So I can install something on it to log temperature, and I have a Raspberry Pi 3 something.
And my dad has like a little homemade weather station.
But it has a GPIO, and that can be connected to serial. So I actually built a Raspberry Pi with a serial hat. And what I could do is I just take it and go plug it into a switch, plug the serial into a network switch, plug the USB port into the USB port on the network switch, and walk away. And a minute or so later, it will come on the network and reverse SSH tunnel to my desktop. And I can configure the switch from my desk.
Oh, wow.
Which is just basically lazy.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, the goal was to be able to hand it to a coworker and be like, go off. And I will sit
plug
here and
this in.
continue to be lazy. But so then I also got a little temperature hat.
Yeah.
And the idea was to be able to like just throw it in a network closet and have it sit there and log temperature and then email me if something goes wrong. But that with the whole project, the Raspberry Pi Nano W was like $10.
5 without wireless,
Right.
W is 10.
Right. So get that, and then
But they call it the Pi Zero.
right 0W. That's what it is.
0W.
And do that, and then have the little temperature hat on top of it, and drop a little SD card, and just toss it. And because a lot of network switches nowadays have USB ports for like putting configs on and whatnot, because everything's USB.
Is the security guard not checking the temperature in that room twice a night?
I have more than just my office that I need to check the temperature on. But yeah, like again, I work for the Direct Stadium. Yeah, there's a lot of places in the stadium that I'm concerned about temperature, and just being able to toss it there,
Just have it.
it would be advantageous.
Another one that I was tempted to do, a lot of the electrical meters emit a wireless signal for them to wirelessly read the meters. So I have my Raspberry Pi that is logging all of the power usage for my house and running it on a server that I can just go to a website on my home network and see how much power I'm using.
And re-emitting a different signal for the meter reader.
It could, but dangerous.
I'm still in the old days, we used to wrap a chain around the meter to make it run slower, right?
And you can buy them at Target. They sell them just down the street here at Target.
Nice.
Raspberries. Now, I don't know if they have the 40.
Oh, really? There's some raspberries in Target?
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
And
I shop at Walmart, that's why I don't know.
Magazines.
I gotta up my game and go to
In fact,
Target.
you gotta ask for it in the bakery. Just go up to the bakery, ask for a Raspberry Pi, they got
Yeah, that's right.
There's a package for, you can get, I think it's $80, you can get all the sensors you want. All kinds of temperature
really?
sensors, and I mean, I got a box this big.
But does it have the common sense?
Especially in America.
That was on that phone.
You can also wait for cluster
You can
development,
boot on a SSD, so you can install an SSD on here instead of normally it uses the little SD cards, like cameras and stuff use. The catch is those are relatively slow, about the same as a 5600 RPM drive or so. But the SSD I've plugged in here, and it's about 20 times faster. And it'll run completely on here. And
It'll go through USB for that?
It goes through USB 3.
USB 3.0?
Yeah. And
Hold that thought. No, go ahead.
Go ahead.
So, you remember I mentioned this thing's got 4 PCIe lanes. Well, somebody unsoldered that chip, and it's up on YouTube, and basically hooked in a X16 slot and ran a Titan off of it. The Titan video.
Yeah.
Yeah, off of a Pi.
And it's probably running in only 4
Is that
lanes
called
of
Pi
code.
Melts? Is that what this video's called?
The graphics card is bigger than the
Yeah, it's pretty fast. I mean, not as fast as the Titan, but
Yeah, it wasn't enough to sidetrack the Titan at all.
If you look at the JaxLUG from 2 months ago, the guy brought in 4 Pis in a cluster, and he was running Kubernetes on them, and testing failover and doing it for development, just because for him to do a cluster of Kubernetes, even like in a cloud something like that, it would cost him more. I think he did the whole setup for like $330. There's a little power Ethernet switch and a really bitchin' little case that mounts all the way right next to each other. So, and I know people that are looking at cluster development, it's just cheap.
I've not got around to doing it.
You were about to say something? Okay.
Displays the lot.
Yeah, for the cluster.
That was impressive that the Raspberry, that Raspberry Pi was running that video without no stutter.
well, that's obviously SSD. That makes a ton of sense.
True.
The fact that it's not running the micro SD card.
Yes. I thought I had it where it at least showed you no, I think I turned off the Yeah, turn it off.
The pretty bits.
The pretty bits.
So the Raspberry OS is a port of Debian
Well, that's
to
good,
the
'cause it
Raspberry
makes
Pi.
it
It is.
Yeah.
Tens of thousands of
It's an
packages.
action, they can stay up and running.
Yeah, it's just.
It's
I mean, that's incredible.
developed to be a computer science teaching tool. So you've got
Is this one using a solid state?
Right, locally, yeah.
Right now?
What am I doing? Oh, yeah.
There it is.
So that's the big thing is the hybrid.
Pi 4 is using
You're
solid
working
state?
local in the data center and all.
Yeah, he said, I think this one's using the USB SSD, right?
Does the ham
Today?
use
Yeah, this one's, no, this one's built-in SD card.
Oh,
so
wow.
This was just the
Yeah.
SD card today. okay.
Yeah.
Jesus.
That's really impressive.
Mine takes like, I don't know, a minute, maybe like
Oh, yeah.
45 seconds.
They all-
I have a
the
3 and
threes
an
are
A plus.
Much slower.
It'll
Yeah.
take a while.
Now, is this the 1 gig, 2 gig?
Yeah, 1, 2, or 4?
2 gig.
2 gig.
Do you ever use Raspberry Pis with your ham stuff?
Just for SDR, which is how I was reading the meter.
So last time I used a Pi, it corrupted the file system. It
SDR
was
is
like,
software defined reading.
if you have like an unclean shutdown, it
Yes.
just corrupts everything.
It can.
You probably don't want to use that as your desktop.
Oh, really?
Well, you just clone the card. That's how I do backups, is I just clone
The
the
whole card?
little SD card, you know, and then either DV copy on a machine or on another computer. And now, if I took, you know, to fell over, all I do is just unplug that card and plug in the new card, and I'm back in business. So-
So you read the idiot.
But if you use the SSD, as, what I was going to do for a high, you know, machine that won't fail is that they do have, let's see, I don't think it's on the 4 yet, but on the 3 there is a firmware change you can make where if you power it off by a switch, you add this little switch to it, you power it off by that switch, it'll do a shutdown and then power off. And you don't have to worry about that. And you just flip the switch again, that's a push button. Push it again and it comes back on and it's back running fine.
Why does not happen in normal Linux, but just Raspberry Pi?
Oh, it only happens in normal Linux. If you shut down Linux without doing a shutdown, there's remember the way Linux does is it puts, it's writing to cache, it's writing to the hard drive only when it needs to, which means that if you do something or it does something, it may not write it out in time. All the laptops don't do a hard power up. They always do a shutdown. So when you hit the power button on a laptop, it actually runs a shutdown and then kills the power.
But when I push the button and hold it on my laptop, it just like dies.
Yes, if you push the button and kill it, it will die and you could corrupt your...
I haven't had any problems yet.
Stop
You
doing it.
will.
That's what we're saying.
Yeah,
Stop.
you will.
Okay,
Linux shut down.
My complaint about Linux is I feel like I have to have 2 computers
Windows.
because my Linux system freezes up on a regular basis.
That's probably because you're corrupting the hard drive.
So stop doing it.
You know that holding down the power button
Yeah.
for 5 seconds?
Yeah.
Stop doing that.
That's
Yeah.
what emergencies are.
Just push it once, let it go down.
I'd like to see the XG4 drive corrupted by doing that.
Yeah.
I haven't seen that. That's what they had to journaling with the XG3 a while back.
Take the laptop battery out and
I
unplug it
do
from
a
the
lot
wall
I do a lot
and
of hard
see.
stuff, and I've never seen that.
Oh, Linux crashes, oh gosh, you don't do a lot
Knock on wood, I have
of...
not seen the XG3 or XG4 have hard drive corruption like that, where I couldn't recover.
Really? Oh, recovery, now that's a different issue, because if you're, because it'll go through the file system on reboot and try to fix it. And even these guys do that. I've seen the Raspberries, and it'll sit there spinning.
Depends on the file system you use.
Yes.
Like if you're using CFS or the
Yes,
other ones, it's also
that's
like that.
another big thing, according to which file system you're using. You can do that to Windows though. You power off a Windows in action, you'll kill it. You can kill it, not
And
necessarily.
if you're using like that, like an SD card or something like that,
And
use
it
the
will
wrong file
not
system, it'll nuke that card. Like if you don't use the XG4 that has the Or the flag is for the SD cards, that's it.
That's because the way the caching works on the, because it's a command paging.
I like that.
So it's not actually writing, it's writing into memory, but not out to the disk. So changes can be sitting in memory when you kill the power that aren't on the
Some of the stuff
disk.
you're seeing on that too is the type of SD card they're using.
Yeah, mainly because of the speed. If you were using SSD, I seriously doubt you'd ever have a problem. You could power off all day long, because it's written so quick.
Well, even when you buy a digital card, like you want to type, that costs like 2-3 times more than look. You can write over them again, they have that.
Yeah, and that, also if you're using any kind of RAID, because that changes the whole dynamics of writing with RAIDs.
That's why it sure beats the old days of the Commodore where you all had to do is turn it on and.
Oh, yeah,
Across both of your drives.
Any pretty advanced applications yet? I mean, have you seen?
Yeah, the one that I use, the most powerful one is SETI at Home. It's all mathematics. And it's 40 times, this machine is 40 times faster than a Raspberry 3 using SETI at Home. I mean, it is blistering fast because the math on here is tremendously better than, the average, as I said, is about 4 times faster. But in math, it blew my Mac completely away. But my Mac's about 5 years old, so did it 10 times faster than my Mac. And SETI at Home just runs amazing. It runs hot. So you have to have a little fan on the Raspberry. But
Are you a communication yet with the?
it's running at full speed. It's called SETI at Home. That's what is it? Berkeley.
Search for extraterrestrial intelligence.
Yeah, Berkeley, University of Berkeley has been capturing data from radio telescopes around. They then consolidate it, and then all that data requires huge amounts of mathematics to process it. So what they do is they have individuals on any computer. It's got there's executables for every computer there is. You can install that executable. You can use it to like a screensaver if you have a Windows machine or something, or I guess a Linux screensaver. Never tried. Or you can, in my case, I dedicate a couple of Raspberries to it. And yeah,
And then you
it's
can also
completely
install
automated.
You can also install it so that it's only when you're not using it. So like, when it goes to sleep, then it will start donating CPU cycles to it.
Yeah, you should run point.
The gain of it, what you could gain out of it, is if you happen to hit the signal, you will become very famous very quick. And what they do is they send the data out to multiple computers. Yours is crunching, the others are crunching. They'll do a comparison to see if it really is a signal. Then if they find what's a real signal, they go back to the dishes and ask the radio telescopes to go look again. If they get another signal, crunch, then you're a winner, and you're in every newspaper in the world, and magazine and TV show.
You did it. You ran the screen.
That's been a long time. I don't think anybody's ever.
Yeah, since like
No,
the 90s.
not
You're
yet.
infamous.
Not yet, but could happen tonight. For all we
Play the
know.
lotto to win.
Yeah, it's a lot of.
Is it really a win if they say we're coming to invade?
Yes, hey, you're still very famous for a very short period of time.
Be famous until the overlord.
All right.
Well, there will be.
Any questions back to Gene?
Linux related.
Linux related, not Linux related?
Your first name?
Who did you take to prom?
Nobody.
My
What's
wife,
your childhood nickname?
Dan.
What was the make,
Remember that?
model, and color of your first car?
Say what was it?
Gene, can you tell us about some of the bugs, big bugs in the GCC compiler?
Not really. I know enough C to be dangerous.
What'd you say?
And I'm like.
I know enough C to be
I
dangerous.
had NFC, I already did NFC.
And then
Yeah,
you're-
I
you're-
did.
And in all honesty, I'm looking at
Anybody
running
gives you that information.
Lower level
Hey.
language.
Not go?
How many lines of code are in the
What about-
Linux kernel?
Enough?
20-something million.
You can Google that.
And 5.
Wait, it's
Yeah,
it's counting.
25 million
Yeah, because it's,
as of
What was that?
last year.
there's if you watch
How
10
many of them are
videos,
superfluous?
they have.
7 million? No.
Yeah,
Well,
they
that's
have
driver.
Linus
That was a good one.
Torvalds.
That's a lot.
He's a weird guy.
15
Driver. See,
plus
that-
million
Yeah,
lines.
There's
what
your
was that?
issues.
Seven-
That's BS, look at BSD versus Linux.
Where's the BSD part?
No, but the BSD, so,
I don't know how this chart works.
That was.
yeah.
I don't know how to graph
Helps
this.
charts.
Problems. That was Windows issue as well, is their code base got antenna.
Click it again, no, there's like, just click the line of code, that one, yeah.
And so
I know how
they,
to write it. Oh, make it bigger.
And there's the,
Click, just click.
that's why Linus is all
No,
about.
I don't know how to read it.
i386,
Read it.
really, get a magnifying
So-
glass.
Because that's like
Drivers.
that's a few million lines of code.
20 million.
So the idea being there that,
Pieces.
that
No, it's
the gray, gray is it's the drivers other, drivers.
I'm
purple is-
colorblind, which gray?
all of them.
Yeah.
So anywho, the other screen said like 7 million lines of code for drivers. And then 139,000 or something like that for, go back one, go to the all.
And look
How
at
many
the
drivers
commands
are
of
one?
thing.
On Google search,
How many lines is system D?
that's right. So 139,000 lines of code in the kernel, but then you end up with 7 million lines in drivers. So that's why Linux has such broad hardware support. Right? Is just an apocalyptic number of
Everybody's making drivers. for it.
lines of drivers.
Well, it still
Except for
works
the
with the
stuff
drivers
I
that
need.
somebody wrote like 30 years ago. Well, that's also a thing, like, Linux is, if you buy a new laptop, you should and it's probably gonna have Linux on it, or Windows on it, unless you buy one that's for Linux.
LTE.
The best thing to do is probably hold on to Windows for a little while until people reverse engineer the Broadcom drivers or the video drivers, or like, I have a ThinkPad T2 or a T480. It has a hybrid video card, and I have to use Bumblebee, and I actually just rolled back to Windows for that because the support is just garbage in Linux. There's a Bumblebee project, and then there's the I forgot the other project was called, but there's 2 different projects, and neither of them work pretty much at all. And they're really janky. And so I bought this laptop about a year ago. These chipsets have been in laptops for probably about 2 years, where what it is it's got an Intel chip, it's got an Intel video card, and the Intel video card runs the screen. And it's a low power video card, it's just on the processor, right? And then it's got a discrete card, which is an NVIDIA card, and it's not attached to the screen at all. It, through software, will do the 3D rendering. So it'll turn on when you're trying to do 3D rendering. It'll do the 3D rendering and it'll hand those frames off to the Intel chipset, which will then display it. Well, that's very complex in driver terms. And so you have these people that are trying to like kind of hand hack this thing in there that's not supported. And I mean, they do it. It's hard stuff. I really appreciate them trying at it, and it does kind of work. But just this month, or like I think it was last week, NVIDIA released a beta driver that has full support. And it's just like, well, then maybe I'll go back to Linux on that. I'm actually using a second laptop for Linux. Right?
In defense of Linux, it doesn't work very good on Windows either.
It worked for me. It works fantastic.
Yeah, well, for the new ones, but 5 years ago,
So-
I had a hell of a time getting, you get
okay.
one or the other off, and it just,
My wife
there's
had
no
a,
fixing it.
had a Dell laptop that we got like from someone that didn't work. I
Yeah.
was like, I can fix this. I could not fix
You
this.
cannot fix
You
that.
should know what you're getting yourself into.
Yeah.
An NVIDIA product inside
Well,
the-
it works or it doesn't.
I mean, but
Right.
API is just as
What I ran
bad.
into was just the package injections and all that stuff, so I had to tweak the Bumblebee package and tweak the
NVIDIA drivers
package.
actually work pretty
Yeah,
decently.
he's
I just,
If you
I just
set
didn't
the
like
non-free
because
stuff,
NVIDIA
yeah.
started using so much more electricity
Yeah,
than
jumps
the-
in.
I just don't like it.
and I wasn't really getting any better graphics.
And that's-
Oh,
Like,
and
like,
the,
like,
Yeah, the other thing that I always have trouble with, especially on Windows, is you've always got to, every program, you've got to specify, use
That,
NVIDIA,
that,
use
well, that was
Intel,
the other
use
aspect, because like,
NVIDIA.
if I wanted to use like Mozilla, I had to do a wrapper for environment, that thing would run in that environment, so.
Learn that from you again.
So I.
But that'll be
Alright,
probably
so-
more complicated, because like NVIDIA's not on board with like anything.
How many packages do you want?
Stack or something like that, so.
They'll take us
I see
long.
your program going, I feel
With,
like this is-
Anyway, I'm gonna wrap it up, because obviously everybody's through
One
talking
of my
about
last
themselves.
laptops, it took me
I
like.
hope you all enjoyed.
I had to turn off.